Mr. Zabin, the case is relatively simple. The defendant was your stepbrother.
Correct.
His mother was married to your father.
Correct.
But your father passed away?
He did in 2000.
The courtroom erupted with laughter the very moment the defendant confidently claimed he had already paid more than $1,000 for a vehicle he insisted was only worth $800. But unlike the amused audience sitting behind them, Judge Judy's expression never changed, because she had already spotted the contradiction that was about to completely destroy his defense. What initially appeared to be nothing more than a routine disagreement over a used 2001 Dodge Durango quickly spiraled into a humiliating courtroom showdown filled with tension, broken trust, awkward excuses, and the collapse of what once used to be a family relationship. Mr. Saban explained to the court that the defendant had once been his stepbrother before the family connection slowly faded after the death of his father back in 2010. Even though the two men were no longer close, the plaintiff admitted he still trusted the defendant enough to help him purchase a vehicle through a payment arrangement instead of demanding the full amount up front. According to the plaintiff, he originally listed the Dodge Durango for $2,500 and agreed to allow the defendant to take possession of the SUV on August 2nd, after receiving an initial payment of $600. The plaintiff then described how the defendant promised to continue making regular payments until the balance was cleared, but almost immediately the problems began. 1 week later, the defendant allegedly handed over another $300, followed by another $100 delivered through his girlfriend, and eventually a tiny $40 bank deposit after months of excuses, ignored messages, delays, and repeated promises that never materialized. As the courtroom listened carefully, Judge Judy calmly walked through the timeline piece by piece, allowing each detail to settle before moving to the next question. The atmosphere inside the courtroom became noticeably tense because the defendant seemed increasingly uncomfortable every time the judge focused on dates, payment amounts, and text messages. Then everything changed when the defendant suddenly claimed the real agreement had only been for $800, a statement so shocking and illogical that even members of the audience visibly reacted in confusion because his own payments had already exceeded that amount. Judge Judy immediately recognized the weakness in his story and began dismantling his defense with slow, surgical precision. In her signature style, she leaned forward and asked the simple question that instantly trapped him. Why would anyone knowingly pay over $1,000 for a vehicle if the agreed purchase price had only been $800? The defendant hesitated, stumbled through his explanation, and desperately attempted to recover by claiming the additional money had been compensation because the plaintiff temporarily kept the SUV registered and insured under his own name while the defendant was driving it. For a brief moment, the defendant appeared hopeful that the excuse might save him, but Judge Judy quickly calculated the dates in her head and exposed the flaw almost instantly. She pointed out that the insurance overlap had only lasted 4 days, making the defendant's explanation sound ridiculous compared to the hundreds of extra dollars he claimed to have voluntarily paid. With perfect timing and unmistakable sarcasm, Judge Judy dryly remarked that it sounded like a pretty good return on your money, causing the entire courtroom to burst into laughter, while the defendant's confidence visibly collapsed in front of everyone. The audience could sense the turning point of the case because the judge had managed to trap him using nothing more than basic math, common sense, and his own inconsistent timeline. Every attempt the defendant made to explain himself only seemed to make the situation worse, and even his body language revealed growing panic as he realized the courtroom was no longer buying his story. Judge Judy continued pressing forward, refusing to allow vague excuses or emotional distractions to interfere with the facts. Then came the final devastating blow that completely shattered the defendant's credibility, when Judge Judy requested the Kelley Blue Book value for the 2001 Dodge Durango. Moments later, the court discovered the vehicle was actually worth more than $2,000, instantly making the defendant's claim of an $800 agreement appear completely absurd and impossible to believe. The revelation shifted the atmosphere of the courtroom entirely, because even the defendant could no longer convincingly defend his version of events. Cornered by contradictions, exposed by his own payments, and overwhelmed by the undeniable vehicle valuation, the defendant quietly admitted that the Kelley Blue Book figure made far more sense than the story he had been trying to sell to the court. In that humiliating moment, everyone inside the courtroom understood the case was effectively over. Months of unpaid balances, broken promises, ignored phone calls, and endless frustration had finally led to this public collapse of the defendant's credibility under Judge Judy's relentless questioning. After reviewing the evidence, listening to both sides, and dismantling every contradiction one piece at a time, Judge Judy ruled decisively in favor of the plaintiff for $1,460, delivering not only a financial victory for Mr. Saban, but also a painful public embarrassment for the defendant. As the case came to an end, the courtroom was left with yet another unforgettable reminder that inside Judge Judy's courtroom, arrogance, dishonesty, and poorly constructed excuses rarely survive once the facts begin speaking louder than the stories designed to avoid responsibility.